I know everyone wants to know what's going on with the quarterback competition every single day. That's the number one story is, all right, who's winning, who's doing this. And for what it's worth, like each individual day, we're trying to keep score and say this guy won, that guy won. The individual day doesn't matter. What matters is like the collection of practices when we get to a point where Tom Monken's ready to make a decision and decide who's been the better quarterback. But obviously, I think through the first 3 days, Shedeur Sanders has been the better quarterback of the two that are fighting for the job.
The Cleveland Browns quarterback competition has become the biggest story of training camp, and every single day fans are asking the same question. Who's winning? Is Shedeur Sanders ahead? Is Deshaun Watson catching up? Is Dillon Gabriel making a surprise push? But here's the reality. Judging this competition one practice at a time can be extremely misleading. Every day, social media fills up with quarterback trackers, completion percentages, highlight clips, and instant reactions. One quarterback has a good day, and suddenly he's the favorite. Another struggles during practice, and people start questioning whether he belongs in the race at all. The problem is that football doesn't work that way.
I think, though, Earl, there's a notable reason for that. Because Shedeur's been with the ones 1 day so far. He'll be with the ones again today. Deshaun's been with the ones 2 days. And the 2 days he lost, he was with the ones. Why is that? Earl, whoever's going against this first team defense right now is tough sledding, man. Like, it is struggle city.
What matters isn't who wins Tuesday's practice or who throws the best pass on Wednesday. What matters is the entire body of work collected over weeks of training camp. When the coaching staff eventually makes a decision, they won't be looking at one individual session. They'll be evaluating everything together. And that's where context becomes incredibly important. If we're being honest, Shedeur Sanders has probably been the most impressive quarterback through the opening days of camp. He's looked poised, he's taken care of the football, and he's made smart decisions. But there's an important detail that many people are ignoring. The quarterbacks are not facing the same circumstances every day.
For whoever's going against this first-team defense, Shedeur didn't have a very good day against the first-team defense. He didn't throw any interceptions the way that Deshaun did, but it was a lot of just like checking the ball down, didn't have time to throw. Guys like Mason Graham and Mike Hall are living in the backfield right now,
rent-free.
Right, that's what. And Quincy Williams is everywhere. Carson Schwessinger's everywhere.
Denzel balling.
Denzel's like breaking up all these passes. So that's why I think it's important for people to remember like context here. Like, yeah, you can go look at the quarterback trackers and all these things and like decide like, oh, he won today.
Shedeur has spent limited time working against the Browns' first-team defense, while Deshaun Watson has faced that group more frequently. And right now, going against Cleveland's first-team defense looks like one of the toughest assignments in training camp. Whoever lines up against that defense is having a difficult time moving the football. We're talking about a defensive unit that is flying around the field. The pass rush is constantly creating pressure. Defensive backs are breaking up passes. Linebackers are everywhere. There are very few easy throws available. When Shedeur got his opportunity against the first-team defense, he experienced exactly what everyone else has experienced. The explosive plays disappeared. The offense became much more conservative. There were more checkdowns. The pocket collapsed faster. The defense dictated the action.
He won that day. There's been very minimal touchdowns thrown. I don't know if there's any until yesterday. Dillon Gabriel threw one on a wheel route to Gage Larvadan. So right now, by my count, I think Dillon Gabriel is the only one who even really has like a legitimate touchdown thrown through the first 3 days, which is crazy to say. But I think it's important to remember like the context of what each guy's doing on any given day. The guy who's going against the first team defense has struggled. That's just facts.
That's not an indictment of Shedeur Sanders. That's evidence of how dominant the defense has been. The same thing applies to Deshaun Watson. Some of his struggles have come while facing the toughest defensive unit on the roster. Interceptions happened. Drives stalled. But context matters. He wasn't operating against backups. He was operating against the defense that has controlled most of training camp. And then there's Dillon Gabriel. Gabriel has probably been one of the most efficient quarterbacks during camp. In fact, he may have the only legitimate touchdown pass among the quarterbacks during the opening practices. That's impressive. But again, context matters. Because if we're being completely honest, there is no way the Browns don't understand what Shedeur Sanders represents.
The guy who's going against the second team or the third team, because Dillon Gabriel's looked really good the first 3 days, they've had more success. So I'm not. That's not to say that like Dylan Gabriel is going to be the starting quarterback and he's the best quarterback on the roster. He's going against the third team, so you'd expect him to be able to make some plays.
But it's more of a tip to the cap.
But it is a tip of the cap to the defense, and I do subscribe to. I know it's the oldest cliche in the book this time of year, but it is 100% true that like the defense is ahead of the offense at this time. Think about it. This offense right now has a new coach with a new playbook and new ideas on what they're trying to execute.
That doesn't mean he hasn't played well. He absolutely deserves credit for taking advantage of his opportunities. But it would be unfair to compare his production directly against quarterbacks facing a completely different level of competition. This is exactly why evaluating training camp requires patience. Numbers alone don't tell the entire story. A completion against the third-team defense isn't always equal to a completion against the first-team defense. A touchdown against backups isn't necessarily more impressive than a smart decision against elite defenders. Everything must be viewed through the proper lens. And there's another reason why offensive struggles shouldn't surprise anyone. The Browns are installing an entirely new offense. Think about what that means for a moment.
There's a lot of new players, too. New offensive line, new receivers, all these things. There's a lot that's on their plate to learn this playbook, install it, execute it on the field. The defense, there's a few new faces. Quincy Williams is new. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, as he kind of works his way into the first team, all these things. Like, there's some new faces, but it's a lot of guys who have been here before. Jared Verse is a new one. There's a lot of guys who have already been here. The system they're not like reinventing the wheel on the defense.
There's a new coaching staff, a new playbook, new terminology, new concepts, new responsibilities, new timing, new adjustments, new expectations. Players aren't just running plays. They're learning an entirely new football language. Quarterbacks have to process information faster. Receivers have to understand route adjustments. Offensive linemen must learn new protection schemes. Running backs need to master assignments. Every position group is dealing with change. Meanwhile, the defense isn't experiencing nearly the same level of transition. Yes, there are new faces on that side of the ball. Yes, there are some adjustments being made. But the foundation remains largely intact. Most of those defenders already know the system. They know the terminology.
There's some things that are different, but the base is the same. Like, they get to just kind of show up to camp, and it's like, hey, let's just play ball. Like, just read and react. Like, you know what you're looking at. You know what you're doing. There's no pads on yet, so the offensive line can't, like, get into guys. The defensive line can just kind of get off the snap and go while the offensive line is still learning things. So it's a cliche, but it is true that the defense tends to be ahead of the offense. But I'll tell you, man, like, if you're somebody who was wondering what the defense was going to look like without Jim Schwartz and without Myles Garrett and all these different things.
They understand their responsibilities. They can simply react and play football. That's a massive advantage during the early stages of training camp. Without pads, defensive linemen can explode off the snap. Pass rushers can attack aggressively. Defensive backs can play fast because they understand the scheme. The offense, meanwhile, is still thinking. And whenever one side is thinking while the other side is reacting, the reacting side usually wins. That's why the old football cliche exists. The defense is ahead of the offense early in camp. It's repeated every year because it's usually true. But what's especially interesting about this Browns team is how dominant the defense has looked despite losing significant pieces from previous seasons. A lot of people expected a major decline. After all, losing stars and key coaching figures is supposed to create major problems. Yet through the opening stages of camp, the defense doesn't appear interested in taking a step backward. In fact, the unit looks hungry. Players are flying to the football. Communication appears strong. Young players are emerging. Veterans are setting the tone. And perhaps most importantly, the mindset remains aggressive. That's encouraging because many analysts predicted that the defense would struggle to maintain its identity after losing important contributors. Instead, the early signs suggest that Cleveland still possesses a deep collection of talented defenders. Look around the roster. Mason Graham is generating positive reviews. Mike Hall looks healthy and motivated. Carson Schweissinger continues making plays all over the field. Quincy Williams has brought veteran leadership and athleticism. Denzel Ward remains one of the premier defensive backs in football. Grant Delpit provides stability in the secondary. Young defenders continue developing. The talent is still there. No, replacing elite players isn't easy. Nobody is pretending otherwise. Losing game-changing talent impacts every level of a defense. Great players command double teams. They force offenses to alter game plans. They create opportunities for teammates. Those contributions matter. But football is still a team game. The Browns aren't trying to replace one player with one player. They're trying to replace production collectively. And history shows that strong defensive units can exist without a single superstar carrying the entire group. The NFL is filled with examples of defenses succeeding because all 11 players execute together. That's what Cleveland hopes to become. Maybe the defense isn't a top 3 unit again. Maybe there's some regression. But can this defense remain in the top 10? Absolutely. And if that happens, something very interesting becomes possible. The Browns don't necessarily need the defense to be historically dominant. What they need is offensive competence. That's been the missing ingredient. For years, the defense has carried enormous responsibility. Too often, defenders felt like they had to win games almost by themselves. They were constantly protecting short fields. They were constantly dealing with offensive struggles. They were constantly asked to be perfect. That's an exhausting burden for any unit. Imagine if the offense simply became average. Imagine if the quarterback position stabilized. Imagine if the Browns consistently scored around 20 to 24 points per game. Suddenly, everything changes. The defense doesn't have to be elite every week. The margin for error increases. Games become easier to manage. Close contests start turning into victories. That's why the development of the offense matters so much. The Browns didn't bring in a new offensive staff just to make minor adjustments. They brought them in to transform the identity of the offense. And while early growing pains are expected, the long-term goal is obvious. Create balance. Because balance wins football games. A top 10 defense combined with a competent offense creates a competitive team. That's the formula. Not a miracle quarterback season. Not a historically dominant defense. Just balance. And that's why Browns fans shouldn't overreact to every training camp headline. One interception doesn't define a quarterback competition. One great throw doesn't guarantee a starting job. One bad practice doesn't mean a player is failing. Training camp is a process. The coaching staff is evaluating everything. Every rep matters. Every adjustment matters. Every response to adversity matters. The quarterbacks are learning. The offense is evolving. The defense is setting the standard. And the real answers won't arrive after 3 practices. They'll arrive after weeks of evaluation, preseason action, joint practices, and continued development. For now, the biggest takeaway from Browns training camp isn't necessarily which quarterback is winning the competition. It's that context matters. The defense has been outstanding. The offense is learning a new system. The quarterbacks are facing different challenges. And the overall picture is far more complicated than a daily scoreboard. So before declaring a winner in the quarterback race, take a closer look at the circumstances. Ask who they're facing. Ask what situation they're in. Ask what the coaches are trying to accomplish. Because when all the context is included, the story of Browns training camp becomes much more interesting. And if these early signs continue, Cleveland may be building something far more important than a quarterback competition. They may be building a complete football team.